Yeah, man. Hey,
You
we're
know,
live. Dude, it's
really?
so random when this thing goes live, man. There's no
Mine
countdown or
says
anything.
mine still says there we go. Now I'm live.
See, there you go. Episode 135, This Life in Tech. I am Jason.
And I'm TK.
And Dan is not joining us. He was going to join us from the airport. I don't know which one because I don't know where he's at today. But apparently his flight got delayed or moved, and we're Danless again.
There's always a good starting point with the Danless, like what the stories and the jokes can be.
Well,
he's probably listening right now, seeing what we're saying.
I went for a run this morning, man, and I started running on the road around my house.
Right.
And there's lots and lots of big hills, man. And I was going up this really big hill on the way home. I'm like, this sucks, dude. I'm tired. It's hot. Bugs are biting me. And this is still better than listening to Dan talk shit. That was like my little motivation to get up the hill.
And then I'm good.
Yeah. Oh man. So check this out, man. I wanted to talk. We sometimes talk about social media, but we never really like dug deep into it. I want to highlight two cool experiences I had this week. Check this out, man. So for a while now, this goes back even before I was running. I started to develop like this little knee pain in my right leg, and I'm a big proponent of if I can figure it out, I'll figure it out myself and take care of it. If not, then I'll go to the doctor. There's just no need for me really to go to the doctor that often. I don't get sick, and when I do, I'm sick enough I just go to the ER. Fuck it. And well, I mean, why go hang out where all the sick people are? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And so over time, man, I've been doing different stretching and range of motion exercises, and I foam roll a little bit, and I have like one of those little massage sticks with the nubs on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
that's really good for you.
Yeah. Well, and so check this out. And over time, I've been trying different things to isolate it and figure out exactly what the imbalance is, right? And so, long story short, I've been watching a series of videos of ultra distance running, and I've been keen in on these guys that don't really show too much of the races they run, but they really show like their training, all the back end stuff, how they pick the gear and all this jazz, right? Yeah, I just find that stuff fascinating. It's part of the human story that you really don't get too often. And I saw this guy, and he was talking about this knee pain he had, and I'm like, dude, that sounds exactly like what I have. And sure enough, man, it was. And what it came down to is a particular way to roll out the muscle. And my IT band was way too tight. And so the IT band's on this side relative to me. And it was too tight, and it was pulling my quads over. And that was pulling up into the knee joint, right? And so I really started attacking my IT band, but from an angle that I wasn't doing before. And dude, you could feel it, man. I'm sure you've had this experience, right?
Yeah.
You get like a muscle release or something, you can actually feel like the tissue start to lengthen. I'm like, oh my God, this is magic. It's magic.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it was just a series of YouTube. I consider YouTube to be somewhat like social media. And I just found it on social media, YouTube, man. And I watched all these videos, and then I started digging deep into it. And I started watching like physical therapy sessions and doctor presentations and looking at some research. And I'm like, holy shit, man, it totally works.
Right.
Totally works. 100%.
I'll tell you what I think is has more social media value today than even YouTube, Google Maps.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because everything's like, if I want to know where a restaurant is, I want to go for the review of the restaurant. I don't type the restaurant name into a search engine anymore. I go right to Google Maps because then I can see where it's at, especially when I'm traveling. Yeah.
I'll tell you what I found immensely helpful. You and I talked about this really briefly a couple episodes ago, where we learned to navigate by markers.
Right.
Right. And so like I got my hair cut this week, see?
Right.
And the girl I go to just changed salons, and she's like in a completely different part of town that I really don't go to too often. So I have no idea where I'm going. And what I find really useful with Google Maps is when you can go into the street view and you can actually spin around and look at the markers.
Yes.
And so for me, I'm like, okay, I don't care about the name of the place. I really don't care too much about the street number because that'll get me close. What I need to know is like, what color is the front door?
Right. Yeah.
And all I got to remember is it's a pink door. And if I just get close to that area, then I'll find it, right?
Right.
I find that immensely useful. And all the metadata that's around it, like their hours, and then it'll show you the graph of like their peak times and stuff like that.
And then you got the graph of their peak times, and underneath it, you got the graph of the traffic.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to, the whole thing is, when you think about it, there's we can have, that can spawn the privacy argument sometimes, because because right then they're using your location, they're using how you're moving, and all of that relational data, to help get that little line of when it's busy and things like that, right? But are we at a point where we want to go and change that, right? And say, hey, let's just stop all that. I think it's, I think the discussion isn't a technical one anymore. It's are you going to use your powers for good or evil?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Well, and if we can agree up front, which I think you and I do, I know Dan and I do, that the point of modern digital technology should be to make our lives easier, let's say, or
yes,
more convenient, or enhanced, or more efficient. There's different ways you can spin that. If there's not an equal amount of evil being done at the same time, or subsequent to that, then, I mean, it's not that I don't care. I care, but you're making my life better, and that's really what I operationally care about.
Right.
That's kind of the way I look at it.
Here's what I want to know. Because again, I think you start talking about, the easiest way to get mass adoption of any app today is to have a social component. Right. And when you say navigation, I think that Google Maps, because most people aren't just searching for school papers. Most people are searching for information. They're searching for stores, houses, places of business, work, those kind of things. That Google Maps in particular is sometimes the right blend of all that. But it's still, from a navigation standpoint, not the social app that Waze is. Right? And Waze from the beginning was designed as a social app. And when it was bought from, I can't remember the name of the Israeli company that they bought to get that, when they first bought it, I made the assumption, obviously incorrectly now, years later, that they were going to take all of that information and how that's gathered and how we socially create roads and just integrate it into Google Maps, and then Waze would go by the wayside. All right, but Waze now, I have a buddy of mine that's got Apple CarPlay in one of his new cars. And, it comes up and boom, he's got that on his whatever size big screen he's got in his car now, right? So I think the UI of Waze is like a kid's toy, right? I like more professional, maybe more modern, sleek, clean line, UI. As opposed to more of an arts and crafts house as opposed to a Mediterranean house, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, and it's just how I am as a human. I like to have clean lines and things organized. But if you get into signing into Waze, you start earning points. Well, does somebody come and buy me a tank of gas? Does somebody what are those points for?
Right.
Again, It comes back to there's no dislike button on any social media. Right? Because we want you to always have a positive experience. The variance of positive is completely how you interpret the amount of likes you get, or against what your perception of how many you thought you should get. And I think Waze, more than anything, where you pick up pieces of candy, aside from the fact they tell you where the police are and all that other stuff, right? But it's like, it's a social media. When I turn it on largely when I'm driving somewhere. I don't pay attention to people, because people can text you now within the app. If you're in traffic, somebody will text and say, "Hey, I think I'm up at the front of this," and thing. And it's now the technologies are blended, right? And so the single use technologies aren't cutting it anymore. And even Google's failed at that a few times. You've got, what was it, Google Plus? It was going to be the next big social media thing. Well, they couldn't pull it together.
No.
Right? And I don't know this for sure, but I heard at one time Facebook was going to try to get a mapping app, so that if I wanted to, I push on a contact, or I see a contact or something, an ad or whatever, it would directly go to their integrated user experience of mapping.
Right.
I don't see how that's going to happen, right? Because at some point, sometimes people do one thing and they do it well. And, Waze being part of Google, Google did Maps so well for so long. It was really, even now, it's really hard for Apple to compete on Apple Maps.
Well, I'll tell you, man, here's another experience directly germane to what you're talking about. I had to take my car to the shop this week just to get its scheduled service, right? And I've never been to a BMW dealer here yet. And so we got a map to it. And of course, I don't care. I don't really need the car that often, right? Especially right now. So usually I just take it, drop it off. Dude, they're keeping it all weekend because I don't give a shit. We only
Yeah.
need one car. And so my wife will come and pick me up and whatever, right? And she has an iPhone and she doesn't use Google Maps. She uses Apple Maps. And her map takes her a completely different way than me. And it's like the most convoluted back road,
Yeah.
1,000 turns, where I just go down and get on the freeway and go right to the dealership. I'm like, I'm standing there waiting on her after I drop the car off. I'm like, dude, where did you go? And she's like, I don't know. I hate that.
When Apple Maps first came, well, that's going into the settings and just basically changing your default map app, right? But I think years ago when I was working at Blackbird, like it's Blackbird was on the other side of 28 from Dulles, and so in order to get there, coming up from the beach, and I had both apps going on the phone. I was testing it out. Apple Maps was brand new and all that stuff. And I get up there, and so I'm on 28, which is a 4-lane interstate, freeway type road. And all of a sudden, because it was I was next to the building, it was like, you are here. I'm like, I'm no way near. Let's stop, get out, jump 3 fences, and get there, right? And so, again, it's how you determine destination. Are you algorithmically savvy enough to say it has to be in the parking lot? It can't just be, it can't be on the backside. It can't be by the dumpster out in the rear, right? You've got to, what level of specificity I'm driving at. And I think, and again, we're being told now that, was it iOS 13, I think, is getting ready to come out, that they really cracked the code on the maps. At this point, who cares anymore?
Right.
Right. I mean, though, I think that war's been fought. You guys lost, and now you're going to come out and dress everybody up, and they're going to salute some false flag, digitally, and then we're going to go back to using something else.
Right. It's interesting though, the point you brought up about the app ecosystem kind of now being more about convergence of services.
Yes.
And I've never been a big app person. I have certain apps that I use for certain things, and I just stick with those apps no matter what platform I'm on. I've been fortunate that most of the apps I tend to use a lot run on Android or iOS, so it doesn't really matter to me. Whereas my wife has hundreds of apps, man. Hundreds.
Yeah.
And now she is also the one that lets the kids use her phone. Like if we're driving somewhere, we're sitting in a restaurant, and somebody needs entertained somehow, it's usually her phone they get, not mine.
Right.
So that drives it a lot. But man, whew.
When I notice, like and I'm sure the same way, I get hinky about apps being on there that I don't use, because if I'm not going to use them, there's some leakage, drainage of information somewhere. And so, the paranoid side of me just says I'm going to get rid of them. And I notice it at app updates. I'm like, how in God's earth is there 28 updates right now? If I came over here for 3 weeks and I decided not to do updates, I'd probably have 70 updates when I get back.
Right.
And some of them would be reiterative on the same app.
Yeah.
I just did it yesterday. I mean, there was a bunch of apps on my phone, and I was like, I haven't used that in 3 months. I haven't used that in 3 months. I haven't used that. When I was in the military, a lot of guys, when they would move, because a lot of the guys moved a lot more frequently than I did, they would move every 2 years. And when they packed up from wherever they left, they would put a date on a box. And if it got to that date, boxes are all taped up and like that, they're never open. And if that box got in the house and during the process of moving in, it never got opened, at the end of 24 months, if it wasn't opened, they just threw it away.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the guys was saying, his wife would be like, well, what if there's something in there we need? It's like, we haven't needed it for 2 years. Right. And I think that's a great way to be less encumbered by stuff. All right. And I think digitally now we collect a lot of digital stuff.
There's certainly a propensity to it. I think I'm way more like you. I don't keep a lot of stuff, whether it's digital or material. And I go through stuff pretty frequently and clean it out. And my attitude is, if I find myself in a situation where I need that, I'll just go get it again.
Right.
And I just accept the loss. You know what I mean?
It's the old adage, the rear view mirror is this big, the windshield is this big for a reason. You have to be cognizant of what's behind you, but don't let it run your life.
Right.
Social media, like social media is like the new mob mentality. And I was, anytime you cycle about, especially anything these days political, which I don't want to get on a political thing, because it doesn't matter what side of the coin it's on, there's craziness everywhere. But just some of the, internally, I'm always like, to some person I've never met, never will met, they're just an anonymous crazy person on the internet, you know, I just want to reach out to them and go, you would never say that to somebody in person.
Yeah, right, right.
Dan will
Yeah,
say
and
the
it's
internet muscle guys.
yeah. I was just gonna say, and it used to be like the keyboard warrior mentality, right? Like I'm gonna mouth off and fuck you,
Right.
and then the obvious return was, well, give me your address and I'll come, and you won't say that. And it's kind of progressed now where it's just like this general ugliness of like abnormal human behavior. It's kind of weird because it's not
Right.
just like aggression anymore. That still exists, but it's also just like, I don't know if I want to call it disrespect, but that's probably a good word for it.
Well, but you know, to jump back to what we said last week, you know, you say I'm going to talk to my younger self. You know, your younger self, and lucky we grew up in the era where you didn't have the ability to have instant feedback. What you see now, like you see it in restaurant reviews. Like I'm at the restaurant and they felt they've been wronged in some fashion, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
rather than waiting and getting out of the restaurant, you go, you know, every table was full. Maybe everybody was busy and somebody just made a mistake, right? And that, you know, that where people now say, whatever you do, don't send food back if it's not prepared because they'll just spit it on or whatever. Well, I would hope not. Like, I'm sure that I'm not, you know, obtuse enough to think that it doesn't happen. But by the same token, it all goes with the attitude. Like, if you're a complete, you know, dick with the whole thing, then yeah, you're going to get mistreated because you've said, hey, I don't want to be treated respectfully because I'm going to start off not respecting what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it comes back to, has anybody, if you've not worked behind a bar or worked at a restaurant or something in the service industry where you got to deal with the general public, I think you're more likely to just spout off. Right. And I also think that now I don't go crazy in establishments, certain stores, or I don't. But if like you go in, you explain something to somebody rationally, and they just want to come back with the answer. You know, I remember years ago, and this is one of the reasons I don't have Cox Cable. Shameless plug for somebody else now. I called up because like everybody else was getting one. I don't know what channel it was at the time. Maybe in the Golf Channel. I don't know. It could, you know, it wasn't the Golf Channel, but it was some, you know, second, third tier channel that isn't hugely widely deployed, right? And I just asked. I said, "When are you getting the channel?" The lady on the other end of the phone goes, "When we get it, you'll get it." I'm just like, well, okay. Where do I go from that? I got two choices. One, I can scream and yell about it. Doesn't solve anything. Or two, you just hang up and like, okay, fine. Because, you know, at the time, and I still think it's the thing, the only company customer service worse than Cox is Comcast, right? You know,
Yeah.
but here's the thing. This is a thing. So do you follow the owner of the New York Knicks on
I
social
don't.
media?
No.
He is a complete maniac and not in a good way. He kicks fans out of the stands at Knicks. I think the Knicks won 15 games last year out of 82 for non-basketball fans. He'll kick fans out if they boo him as the owner because he can't put a team on the floor. Former players he's almost gotten in fights with and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you know
that's
how
not
he
good.
made, well, you know how he made the money and he's abusive to the media and everything else. You know how he made all his money? The CEO of Comcast.
Oh yeah, well that makes
And
sense.
so, you know, when you start saying, you know, with your kids or fellow employees or, you know, subordinates and stuff like that, you know, the apple didn't fall too far away from the tree because he runs his customer, or the customer service is running consistent with the fashion of his personality.
Right.
And I would hope that if you called, you know, I'll say certainly when, you know, we were at Silent Circle, our customer service folks were great. Why? Because we put a lot of effort into making that an environment because it's like baggage claim, right? You've never stopped a baggage claim after you got off a flight and said, hey man, thanks for getting my bags here. You guys did a kick-ass job. I was first off the carousel. Keep up the good work, right? No, people walk in there with pitchforks and pulling their hair out because now all of a sudden one of their bags got misplaced.
So that interesting question, because I do this not all the time, but sometimes it occurs to me, and I've developed like little habits around it. Like here's the thing: I've never personally worked at a restaurant, but I've worked in retail. Right. But I have this little thing at restaurants where when we're done eating, I like to stack all the dishes nice and neat at the end of the table, get everything nice and clean. That way, it's easy for the person to pick it up and move on. And it's just a little thing I've developed over time, kind of for those reasons. Like I think most people come in and just have a neutral experience. They don't complain, but they don't really say anything positive either. It's what I would call neutral, right?
Right.
And then you get a handful of knuckleheads that come in and cause problems for people. because they're having a bad day, their life's miserable, whatever, right?
Right.
And so sometimes I think to myself, well, you know what, man? Even if I've had a neutral experience, it really doesn't cost me much to give a compliment or give a little extra tip or stack those dishes up nice and neat. And just helping another human being out, man. This is the kind of way I look at it.
I stack the dishes largely because I have some obsessive compulsive issues that I got.
Yeah, I think you and I are a lot like that way. I just can't stand shit strewn all over the table.
No, and once I'm done, I want to get it cleared up. So I'm going to do my part to make it an easy experience. But yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, it's the locals mentality, right? It's why, we cultivate. It's a cheer. I call it the Cheers effect, where I've been in Virginia Beach since '88, and I don't go to all that many places. And when a new place opens up, if I enjoy it, I try to make friends with somebody behind the bar because I want to come back there. And again, it comes back to that social thing, right? And we can't just do everything on an app,
right?
And because I think largely the experience you have in public is how willing you are to be perceived, whether you talk or not, but to have that open body language and everything like that, to say, hey, I'm not coming in here, like baggage claim, right? People are coming in because something has gone wrong. And then you stack on the fact people don't like to fly, people, the system is not optimized, then you got to throw TSA in there and everybody else. And all of a sudden that poor person in baggage claim, it's just like, trying to make a living and they're getting the bad end of something they had absolutely nothing to do with.
Right.
And it's
right. I mean, they really are just a victim of circumstance.
Yeah. Because I think, here's the thing. You go in, like I go to one restaurant for wings all the time in Virginia Beach. And they could almost write my order. If I change up my order, I go, hey, I'm not going to get that. And I have to say it the minute I walk in.
Yeah.
Right. And
see, and I like shit like that, don't you?
I do too, right? And there's a comfort in there. I've been going to that place for probably 25 years now. The current owner current owners were the general manager and the head cook, chef, whatever you want to call it. When the older couple that owned it got ready to retire, they sold it, and so it's kind of stayed in that restaurant family for a little bit. The first place my sons ever stopped by on the way home from the hospital was there, so that the previous owners could see it, because we had to drive by there when they were asking from the day. I was like, that was the first place he ever stopped, right? He didn't make it home first, right? But there's other places around the beach where I go, where people, right? And then it becomes, then you're on social media with them, then your friends, and that's that's the social experience that we have. But now that social media piece is almost always inextricably woven into that, right? Because I think that's used to be like, hey, can I have your phone number? Now it's like, hey, are you on Instagram? Are you on Facebook? Whatever you see, they'll hook up, right? And so now I know I've got a way to get in touch with you, and now I can not only get in touch with you, but especially as a business owner, I can share everything that we're doing because I know you like coming here.
Right. Yeah, it's this. It can create a rich community experience. Like, here's the other positive thing I wanted to highlight, because this one actually didn't surprise me, but I kind of marvel at it, because it's one of those things that I've been aware of as like a potentiality of Twitter specifically, but I've never personally experienced it because I've never engaged with it this way. But check this out, man. For years, I've been trying to find this one specific song that I could not remember the band name and I could not remember the song name, but I remembered like the first part of the lyrics. Okay.
Right.
And for years, like every so many months, I'll get a little bug in me and I'll try to find it, and I'll get really close. I'll find bands that sound like it, but it's not them. And I'm like, okay. Long story short, man, the other day something happened. I'm like, I got to find that song today. And I'm a little ashamed of it because it probably wasn't the best use of time, but I spent probably 4 to 6 hours, man. Just going through, listening to things.
Nice.
You know what I mean? It's just a splinter in my mind. And I finally gave up, and I went in and I told my wife, I'm like, hey, listen, Marcia, I think I finally have to give up. I mean, this has been like 10 or 15 years, man.
Right.
And she's like, dude, why don't you just put it on Twitter? I'm like, I don't know why I haven't done it. This is actually a really good question.
That's look at you with the big brain stuff, right?
Yeah. I'm like, that's a really good question. Why haven't I? And so then it forced me to think about some of the assumptions I've made. most of the people I know don't listen to the type of music I do, and I know that because I know them. So I, anyway, I made a series of assumptions, and I thought, fuck it, I'm just gonna put it out there. And so a few days ago, man, I put, hey, I need some help. Here's the first part of the lyrics. I'm pretty sure this is word for word 100% accurate. If not, it's not, north of 90%. Okay, it's in this time frame. It's this genre. I cannot find it. I shit you not, man. It only took a couple hours.
That's awesome.
It's somebody that I don't follow, doesn't follow me, somehow got retweeted. They picked it up and they found it. And check this out. This is how they found it. They took the string, which was the lyrics, and searched it in chunks, which I've done. The way they found it is they realized that one word, petals, like rose petals, was misspelled like car pedals with a D. And they changed it. They fucking found it. And this dude tweeted it to me, and as soon as I read the name, I'm like, 100%, that's it. I've been listening to it nonstop since.
So from the time that you started looking for it till the time he found it was how long?
Man, I probably spent 4 to 6 hours.
No, I mean, even before that, right? You've had casual thoughts all of a sudden, like apparently you used to listen to the song, then you forgot about it, then it came into your head. So from that time till the time you started listening to it again, days, months, years? I mean,
years, man. Check this. I'll tell you the whole story. Check this out. Years and years ago, so this is probably 99, 2000. I was sitting in my office. I was working in film in Hollywood. I worked for a pre-production studio.
Yep.
And sometimes when I wanted to goof off, I would get music off the internet and create a mixed CD for myself. You know what I mean?
Little Kazaa back then.
Hey, I don't know, man. I don't remember. It was too long ago. And so I had this one CD. I had this one CD that had this genre of music on it, but just a bunch of different bands. Okay.
Right.
And long story short, fast forward to about 2002, 2003-ish. I had done like a 48-hour nonstop shift at the first startup I worked at. We put our e-commerce platform into production. And I go home to go to sleep, and I fuck up and I don't lock my car. And my car gets robbed. Okay. And part of what they took was my giant Case Logic CD thing that had that CD. And I've never, ever been able to find that since. So you're talking that's 16 years.
Wow. And it took 2 hours. All back in 2008, you could have solved that problem with Twitter.
Yeah. And it's such a marvelous question from my wife. Why don't you just go to Twitter? I don't know. That's a good question. Why haven't I?
You and Dan are pretty, compared to me, or you're prolific tweeters, right? I mean, I don't, most times I just don't feel like I have anything that I want to know or I need to ask. And I'm, my introvert, coming out in me will say, well, why does anybody want to hear that? And I think, I don't know, like, it's funny because some people just, want to hear the sound of their own voice. I mean, most of the time, I think when you and Dan and some of the other folks that are kind of in that sphere that we all think, they're question askers, which I think is great, right? And it's opening up a dialogue. But I like this mass, like people that tweet hundreds of times a day.
Oh yeah.
Or Facebookers, right? I mean, to the point where, you're just like, my God. But that comes back again to that social media thing. I hope your Facebook life, your real life's as good as your Facebook life. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll tell you, man, here's another example for you. So my 25th year high school reunion is coming up, and I actually am going to it. And I haven't, with maybe one or two small exceptions, I haven't seen any of these people since the day we graduated. And I don't know that I really knew them that well then. Okay. I was kind of, in high school, I wasn't popular, but I kind of transcended all the little groups, and I just kind of had friends in every little social group, and I was just myself. Right? And so I go on Facebook because that's how they're managing this, and I don't really use Facebook that much. And I'm like, dude, and here's why: because it's fucking 100% unusable. It's just filled with garbage that I have no idea what any of this is. I don't care about any of it.
Right.
Like, what happened? Like, it's just a waste of time.
Well, you look at the entirety of their customer base, which I think, if you say, here's the total population of the world, minus all the people that don't have food and shoes, let alone electronics,
Yeah.
We get down to Maslow's triangle, and we're sitting up here at the top. and then you remove infants and toddlers that can't use it yet, I think we're probably close to like, you know, what most statistically valid things would say full penetration,
Yeah.
right? Or full saturation in a market, right? So knowing that, all of a sudden somebody said, we could probably advertise these folks.
Hmm.
And that's where we're at now, right? And whether it's, aside from all, the collection of information and monetizing, but we can advertise these folks,
Hmm.
right? And I think you're right. Facebook to me is more unusable than anything. I've gotten to the point where I'm just hoping that most of the people that I want to see what their kids are doing, whatever, on Facebook, have an Instagram page and they link it together just so I can get it in that short burst.
Yeah.
Like, the short attention. I've taken now, like when I'm over, because I'm still over in Kosovo. In fact, I'm leaving tomorrow, and it's always a sad day when I walk out of here, because the folks that are here, I love them to death. And I've taken over here now just because I don't have time when I'm working to just watch full episodes of things. But what I find I do is I go to YouTube videos and I watch segments of TV shows I used to watch and watch the funny highlights from that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, now it's time to go back to work, right?
Right.
But Facebook is, by the way, I've got my 40th coming up here in 3 years. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I got a couple out there, and I've never been to one either, and I have no desire to go to one. I just, I went to a big high school, and there's lots of people in it like that, and I'm probably most likely be walking around. People come, hey, how you doing? I'm doing great, man. How you been? And then walk away and go, I don't even know who that guy is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, the only reason we're going is my parents don't really travel, and I really want our daughter to get to know them. And so, I mean, that was one of the nice things of moving back to the East Coast is it's a 6-hour drive to Ohio, and
Right.
well, if I got to drive 6 hours to visit, if I can get a twofer or even a threefer out of it.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm like, well, screw
the
it.
other thing is my high school, and it's been this way since before I graduated high school, always has, and think back to a different time in the 60s and 70s, you'll understand why they started this. They always have the high school reunions the Friday after Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Why in God's green earth do I want to go up to New England in November? Like, can't you guys do this? Even do it in September, like when the leaves are peeping and all that. I mean, pick something. It doesn't have to be in July, but for all things holy, why do I have to go up there and freeze my behind off again?
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, it's a bridge too far because quite a few of my classmates still live in New England. So to them, it's like, all right, yeah, I'll drive down. That's an hour drive.
Right. Right. Well, and that's what I found too. There was a handful of us that went to school. I think I told you before, most of my friends either stayed in a factory or went to service.
Yep.
Most of my friends went to the Navy. I don't know why.
I think most Midwesterners gravitate towards that, especially upper Midwesterners, Rust Belt Midwesterners, because they're landlocked.
I think so.
And every time they've gone to the beach, it's been to a freshwater lake. Granted, a massive freshwater lake of one thing, but because I've asked people that before, like Michiganders are big. Like there's a huge population of folks from Michigan that are in the Navy, and it's like, I want to go see the world, and I figured I wasn't going to do it from the center of the U.S.
I think that I really think that is it. Well, and I remember like the vision of it being sold to us from the recruiters of, you'll get on this giant ship and you'll sail the world. And it's like an attractive dream as opposed to we're going to put you in this giant plane and drop you off somewhere and then you're going to walk everywhere.
Right.
I've been walking my whole life everywhere.
Exactly.
I was a latchkey kid and I got a flat tire and I didn't know how to fix it.
So you had to start hoofing it.
Yeah, man. I mean,
my dad would not. When I was a kid, my dad used to fix it. He worked his way through college as a car mechanic, and so we never took the cars to the shop. I mean, that could be only thing was to be the transmission. He wouldn't take the whole car. He'd take the transmission off and bring it in, and then go back and reinstall it. Right, but so I think I was 7 or 8. First, second grader. And I was out with my mom and got a flat tire. And so I jacked everything up and changed it. My mom called my dad at work, which is something we never did, and said, hey, can you come down and check it out? My dad's like, if he changed it, he got it. I've watched him change the tire before. He knows how. Right. Mm-hmm. But he wouldn't let my sister get a driver's license without knowing how to change the tire. In fact, I guarantee you, she knows more about automobiles than her husband does. But you're right. Like you get these basic things and you're like, I just don't quite know how to do that. So I'm going to have to hoof it now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, or what's the alternative? You're going to stay stuck out in the country. Now, I didn't grow up in the country. I grew up in the city, but it's Northeast Ohio, man. It ain't far to get out into the wilderness. You know what I mean?
Oh
I
yeah,
was just,
so,
I
yeah.
was just what's that?
Suburbs, like you got big buildings, and all of a sudden you've got farmhouses, right? And that curve happens in a hurry.
Yeah, well, and then you go over the hill, and now you're in Amish country,
Yeah,
which was always fun. I loved going there. I still love going there. When we go back and visit, we go out there.
right. There's a
Oh,
when I was living my grandparents lived in Pittsburgh, so we would
mhm.
drive from New England down to Pittsburgh all the time. And we not every time, but somewhat with so a sense of purpose with frequency would drive through Amish country just because it was beautiful and the people were gracious and all that stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, man. I mean, at least in that part of Ohio, and I think it's true with that area of Amish. They tend to be a little standoffish. But
Right.
if you can sit down now, one of the big reasons. Well, I shouldn't say one of the big reasons. I actually don't know what the motivation was, but I took German throughout middle school and high school, and so a different dialect than they speak, but I could talk German
Right.
with them, more or less, right? And that broke down some barriers. But you could sit there and have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Not nice people, calm. I mean, they're just other human beings. They just live in a different world.
Right. It's funny because there's a big Mennonite population in Virginia
Mm,
Beach, and
mm,
it's on the south. It's on the side of town that I live on because largely we're kind of adjacent to all the farming community, right?
mm.
Um, and you know they have a certain lifestyle, but it's almost funny. It's kind of humorous, not in a condescending way, but just that kind of giving way to some of the modern conveniences is you'll see them in the supermarkets and all that stuff. I mean, and they're part of it. I actually felt bad. There was like a dairy and then ice cream shop, and there was some food handling practice that they didn't adhere to. The place had been open for decades. Not one person had ever gotten ill, complained, everything like that, and they were just like, "That we can't do it that way," and they shut them down.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I mean now it's like the former place where you go in and get ice cream and like that. It's now a breakfast place, and people kill it, and they're killing it in there. But it's you know, and I'm reminded of it every time I come over here. Um, you know, and a lot of it is big agro business, not wanting, small organic farms and stuff like that to really, take off until they can figure out how to monetize it themselves,
Right.
and making it harder to get an organic slash non-GMO standard than it is to go, get chicken pumped full of steroids, right? And there's so many things that humans are allowed to consume, and more importantly, that processing facilities are allowed to put into it, that you can't. Nobody, nowhere would allow you to do that. Like people go,
Yeah.
like the Burger King, like when the Burger King opened up here in Pristina, that was a big deal, right? Because anything that shows up that is American is a big deal here. Because this is my opinion of this, and just from talking to people, since the 1500s, everybody that showed up in Kosovo to say they're their liberators actually became their occupiers,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And I think I think it's one of the places we did a good job of saying, hey, here, we're going to help you out. Now it's yours. Figure it out. We need our help. Let us know. And that level of help or attention kind of it goes up and down just like any other relationship. And I think we're on a high right now with what the U.S. Um, from an embassy perspective, from a foreign policy type perspective, is doing for the country. But you go to Burger King, like it's people sit down there. Why? Because the hamburgers are not made with the meat. The bread doesn't have all the preservatives and like that because they adhere to the local laws of Britain. It's actually it's not bad.
Yeah.
Whereas a couple of the guys that I work with went to the U.S. and one of them, we were talking about Shake Shack when I was here, and he's like, man, that's bad to the bone. Why? Because it's not overhandled processed food, right? Never frozen. The same as Five Guys, right? Never
Mhm.
frozen. Get it in there, boom, it's a decent burger, right? And I'm not advocating that we go out and eat those every day, right? But when you do, at least try to put something in your face that's not that terrible. I think when you look back at some of the food practices of or food handling practices of a lot of groups, right? That when it contradicts big pharma now, we have less tolerance to say, well, what you're doing is probably not here, but it's also not harmful to anyone,
Right.
right? Because I don't think it's just like in most things in life, government's job is to try to make a path that the most amount of people are served. And sometimes, you've got to look out for them, that minority that's still doing things right, but they're not in the center of the road.
Right, right, right. Well, the whole food thing's interesting in the U.S. If there's ever an area where there's like legitimate conspiracies that have taken place, it's almost all around food or food type
Oh yeah.
products.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man.
I
The
know.
the amount of lobbying that goes on to demonize things like, let's say, fat, right? Or eggs is the big one too.
So hold on, before you go, are eggs good for me this week or are they bad?
You're right.
I can't keep track.
Yeah, I know, man. Well, and it's like the craziest thing. And this is part of like what I've been figuring out just for myself, right? For myself, especially after moving here and being here for a year now. And I've taken the summer off and really just focused on me and grown the garden now. And we made the conscious decision to not use any pesticides at all.
Right.
Just because A, we don't want to spend the money on it. B, we don't want to handle it. And C, we don't want to taste it. And man,
Right.
I'm not a snob. I'm not a connoisseur. A lot of times I just want to eat and get it over with because I got better shit to do.
Right.
But man, you can taste the difference,
Yeah.
And like with eggs, well, how about we have a slightly different conversation? Instead of saying eggs are good or eggs are bad and blasting that out into the noosphere so that it gets popularized into a meme, right?
Right.
Why don't we start talking about the missing part of that statement, which I think this is the downside of social media, because often this part of the statement is always missing. Eggs are insert good or bad for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, so I grew up, when I was born, I had really bad food allergies as a baby. Eggs, corn. In fact, milk was the big one. I've never had cow milk, man. I've never had a glass of cow milk ever.
Yeah.
And even today, where like I'll eat a little bit of ice cream, so I've had like processed cow milk, dude, it makes me instantly sick. Instantly.
Right. So don't do that.
Yeah, no, I just stay away from it. Eggs I can tolerate now, but this is my point. Is so like I know, okay, if I want to follow a certain lifestyle with food, I can't have more than X eggs in a day. Otherwise, I'll start to get sick because of the allergy.
Right.
But past that, what am I really worried about? Cholesterol? Whoa, what the fuck?
But I mean, I think the food question is adjacent to or inextricably holding hands with the big pharma issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. We don't, and what did we think was right? In the 60s and 70s, when, you had high cholesterol, they would tell you to eat margarine instead of butter.
Mm-hmm.
We categorically know that's wrong now. And I'm probably going to say this right, hydrogenated vegetable oils, which were used in margarine, they've basically, hey, if you have too much of that, you're going to grow a tail or a horn or something like that, right? And,
yeah.
But it's funny because, most of the European, I'm saying to say outside the European Union,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the European Union, the big joke is that there's like 30 pages on how to properly handle a head of cabbage from the time it leaves the field till the time it gets thing. And that's part of it, right? You make the instructions so complex, you're not encouraging people to do it correctly. You're actually mandating that they do it poorly because it's too complex for one person to handle.
That's right.
Whereas I think Eastern Europe, a lot of places, and a lot of places in Asia, they have age-old techniques that have always worked, and they're not fancy, and it's hard to legislate, and so there's going to be a constant battle. But I think in the U.S., it is way over carbing, right? And how many? I don't think I have. I'm not celiac. I don't have wheat allergies or anything like that. But as I've gotten older, I wanted to first lose a bunch of weight and then maintain weight. Cutting that like high gluten flours, bread flours, and everything out of my diet for the most part has really worked wonders. That in conjunction with the fact that I have really bad arthritis, if I start having a lot of wheat and stuff, breads and stuff like that, it tends to really enhance the inflammation. So I don't really eat it. I'll have a piece of pizza every now and again because I really love pizza. I really do. But I came over here. It was the first night I got here a couple weeks ago, and there's a great restaurant across the street from the office, and we're all becoming friends with them now that we've been here a couple months, and they're just great dudes, family type place. But they make great pizza. By the way, Kosovo is a great pizza country. There's lots of great pizza joints everywhere, right? But I ate this great pizza, and the restaurant's called Collections. I ate a collection pizza, and the next day I was like grumble belly thing. My joints were starting to hurt a little bit, and it just because my body went into overload.
Yeah.
having it. But
Yeah.
I was out with two of the founders of the company that we're partnered with, and we were eating the other day, and they have a specialty. It's one of my favorite things to eat. It's called chipotle. They're these little seasoned beef sausages, and they have a sauce called kaimak. It's a cheese type sauce, and then we had a salad, right? And now they're talking keto, they're talking all this other stuff, but what works explicitly for me, I think in general terms, you can go, okay, if I'm doing two things, if I'm moving more and I'm eating less, I'm going to be healthier. And then if I modify what I do when I move, or I modify what I do when I eat, then you can start to tweak it for your body.
That's
and
right.
Be self-aware, right? But most people want, and this is not just for food. Most people don't want to go, how do I feel? They want to go to the doctor, and the doctor say, hey, do this, take that, get a pill, right? And I think that's there's one of the, especially like with morbidly obese people, right? There's very few of them that I've met that'll see, hey, this is all on me, right? Because you don't wake up and go all of a sudden like, where did all this weight come from? Right?
Right.
You be my age, you're in your 50s, and all of a sudden start packing on some pounds and go, I got to do something like that, right? But our friend that used to work with us at Silent Circle and then worked at the bank we were taught, I didn't bring it up, and we were sitting when I was at Silent Circle, and he was at the time coming to grips with it. He's got to change his lifestyle, right? And he was the first morbidly obese person, and I'm sure people think it, they just don't say it, that came outside of himself and said, I'm the one that ignored me for 25 years and got this way. I've got to turn it around.
Right.
And I told him, I said, look, it's one step, like get rid of something, right? What I suggest is, first off, stop smoking, right? Because, and for the people out there, if I get the dates wrong or whatever, up until probably 20 years ago, maybe even plus or minus, the only thing that humans were allowed to consume in the US that you weren't not only not allowed to know, it was forbidden for you to know the ingredients, were cigarettes.
That's right.
Right. And and you live right in the heart of big tobacco country, right? Why is that, right? Because it's not a health concern. It's anything else. It's all of a sudden we figured out cigarettes were bad for you. 1954, I think it was it Reader's Digest came out with an article on smoking, and that was the start of the turning point of it being good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at what I'll say sometimes adverse about us in the U.S. with what we consume with food. We've de-glamorized cigarette smoking greatly in the U.S., right? Well, the cigarette companies aren't going out of business now that we're not smoking. Where's it all going? Right. And it's not always going in the form. And the new big thing, obviously, is vaping. All they do is liquefy nicotine, And how I know this isn't important, trust me, I know it for a fact. So when you transport, or when liquid nicotine is transported, if it gets on an airplane, you're not allowed to put any more than 1 liter, so 1 Gatorade bottle full of liquid nicotine on an airplane, and it's packaged like hazmat.
Yeah.
And because if it leaks and it gets in the ventilation system, at the very minimum, it's going to make everybody extremely sick. At the maximum, it could kill everybody.
That's right. Yeah, people don't realize it about nicotine.
Anybody got any questions about cigarettes, right? Or chewing tobacco or anything else, right?
Right.
And I think that's the thing. But it's like, I think in anything, and it's since we do tech, look at the hundreds of apps now that are all geared towards not just fitness but modifying your diet. How do I eat this? And it's now it's take a picture of the box of the of the UPC code, and now it went from you having to type everything in to take a picture of the box, take a picture of the food. If it looks, you got 2 eggs, this, that, and the other, and it starts to do the calorie count for you automatically.
Yeah.
Right. But again, it's like anything else. People in cyber, right? When somebody downloads an app, they buy a program, they're using a computer, there's an assumption, right, or a desire that I don't have to worry about the security of this because somebody else took care of it. Somebody's smarter than me. Well, I would say it's not necessarily smarter. I would say it's somebody that's engaged in wanting to do that because it's interesting to them. Right. And more importantly, now I've got somebody to blame. Right. That, I've got a place where I can go, put my angst. When it comes to big companies, well, that's why they hire third-party vendors,
That's right.
right? Because if I install, pick anybody's endpoint protection solutions, right? And Gartner and ABS and companies like Forrester and all those, they do a good service, right? They spend a lot of time testing everything out. But there's also a retail component to that,
Mhm.
right? And it has to be their business, so there's a retail component to that. And what do a lot of CISOs and CIOs depend on? They depend on Gartner, Forrester. They pay for one of those services, and the minute something goes wrong in there, because it's cyber, it's gonna go wrong, right? It's not if, it's when, right? And then they can go, well, PwC, Ernst & Young, IBM, Gartner, Forrester, all of these people said it was great, and we used the product, and something went wrong. We're going to get after it, right? And so it becomes a safety blanket.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In the consumer world, what do you mean my data went? I trusted them. Well, under what mechanism did you say, hey, trust is your trust? You've earned my trust,
Right.
especially with social media. I mean, like, the secret's out, right? It's like I always say, like when Robert Byrd was a senator, had been a Grand Poobah in the Klan in the 50s. Like, by the 50s, we knew it wasn't a social club.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, you're on social media now. You understand that, you don't pay for it. You're the product.
Right.
Right. Your lifestyle, everything you do, you're productizing it. Right. How much longer before Congress wants to pass a law with all these health apps that data has to go there, for insurance purposes, right? I'm a big believer, whether it's car insurance, health insurance, or whatever. If you voluntarily want to participate in whatever program they have to lower your premiums, and it's eyes wide open about the data that you're coughing up, have at it, right? But now with the car insurance, they have the little things that plug into the CAN bus.
Yeah.
And it basically sends out a signal that says, hey, this person's a safe driver, and you can demonstrably lower your rate. If that's a conscious choice and you want to do that, fine. Same with all these, wellness programs and all the other things that go on. If you go get all your stuff done, because I'm a big believer in preventative medicine.
Mhm.
Don't wait till your plan is wait till I get sick to show up. I think that preventative medicine, but I also think that the easiest way to do that is if you would say to every American every 8 weeks, go into a lab and have them draw your blood, and they do a full CBC, full blood panel, you can in a hurry get to a better place. And I have to do that largely because I've got medications I take for arthritis in my heart. But what I do now, when you talk about cholesterol and all the other things, is I have a much greater handle on it, right? It's in my app from my healthcare provider. I go in, I can see it, I can compare it to the previous ones, and then plot a course ahead. But again, it's very participatory, right? I have to say,
Yeah.
I want to do this, and then how am I going to modify things? And again, do the research, do the basic physiology, ask questions on social media, like-minded people, and say, okay, I'm trying to accomplish this goal. How do I get there?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think that to me, well, and it's a lot like the civics conversation we've been having off and on over the last month or so. Technology in this way is at a place, if we choose to empower us to govern ourselves. I joined the wellness program at High Point.
Yep.
Why? Because I'm already in a good active lifestyle, and I'll save $600. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not a dummy. I mean,
that's some quick arithmetic there.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean. And so, and so when I was at Capital, when I was in Maryland or California, I had Kaiser Permanente. I love Kaiser, dude. Beautiful. You can just go into one building. Everything is there. You don't even have to leave it.
Yeah.
And I would get my blood drawn every 2 months.
Yeah.
And I went in because I owned it with no shit, man, a litany of tests that I wanted done.
Right.
And the doctor would work with me.
Right.
And he would order it all up. I'd walk across the hall to where they draw it, and they'd have this big giant vat of vials, and they'd just draw it all. And by the time I got home, some of the labs would be done.
It took so much blood from you. You were lightheaded when you got done.
Yeah, it was almost like a donation.
Yeah.
But I was experimenting a lot with myself,
Right.
Um, and you're right. And when you own it and you're doing it not only preventatively but regularly, a value then becomes relative to something rather than just a value across 350 million people averaged,
Right.
right?
Well,
And you,
it's the testing postulate theory. If I think if there's five potential things that are causing the problem or whatever behavior that I'm exhibiting, if I change all five things at once, how do I know which one was actually the one that's,
that's
I've
right.
got to have some measure of a control group at any given time.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
it does take time, right? And again, to jump it back into social media, we've got an instantaneous response, right? Um, roughly every 6 months, the theory is that your body regenerates all its cells and everything like that. So if that's really the time where you can change yourself. And people start to work out, and they don't internally they'll feel better, but externally the mirror test. And I would say men are much better at that than women, whereas women just socially conditioned to stand on a scale that at a certain height you're supposed to be a certain weight, right? And so that starts early in life, whereas guys walk in and go, look good in the mirror, no big deal, right? And unless you're a boxer or pugilist where you got to do things by weight class, most dudes don't care. Like they want to achieve a certain look, and if that look is possible based on the fact you're a mesomorph, ectomorph, whatever, that they're going to do it, and they're not going to look in the mirror. And I think it drives how they eat, supplements, and everything else. Whereas up until probably 15 years ago, women that are lifting and get big and muscular, I don't know if it was frowned upon, but it wasn't in the mainstream.
that's right.
Right. Whereas now, there's this big fitness culture, and especially with CrossFit, it really had a lot to do with this. But
Yeah,
you see a lot of these girls, I mean, they're jacked, right?
yeah,
And even if you don't find that to be like sexually attractive, you just have to go, that is an unbelievable amount of dedication to something. And you made yourself what you wanted by hard work and discipline.
that's right.
Right?
Yeah,
But even as you get older, and I'm going to tell you, being probably the oldest person in this conversation for the rest of the time we have this, unless you go out and find some old dude that's like getting a social security check that wants something to do on a Sunday, that it's like you have to be more cognizant of it,
mhm.
right? And I'm to the point now where like if I go out and like I said, I love tomato sauce, I love red sauces, all Italian foods and everything like that. But now I'm getting to the point where I eat gluten-free pasta, not because I have a gluten thing. I guess I do to a certain extent because of the inflammation,
Mhm.
but just because I still want to do it and I want to take responsibility for myself and not go, hey, I need another pill. The
Right,
only
right.
exception to that, I think now, is we start with hormone therapy, right?
Yeah,
When you say you go get an advanced hormone panel, and when you look at any, when you get the blood results, lab results, there's a normality, and there's a big line, and you want to fall somewhere in between there. Well, you take testosterone, for example. Like that normal could go from 16 to 100, let's say. I don't know what the numbers are, but if it's on 100, 120, it can go from 16 to 100. Well, when I was 18, I probably had 100. And, as you get older, you start dropping it down. Well, traditional medicine, right? When you go and say, hey, they're like, oh, everything's normal. Well, what's normal? Like, is it normal for a 55-year-old? I don't want to be normal for a 55-year-old,
right.
right? I want to do, if for no other reason, then you're going to lube your joints differently. All the things that are, your mind's going to think more clearly and everything like that. And not just for the vanity play, like the external. My experience has been, and it's anything in life. It's not just your healthcare, but I think it's more pronounced. If you take care of, if you're an active participant with your provider, and they can see change. It's one thing to go in there and say, hey, I want to do this, and run your mouth about it, and then you come back and you can, hey, have you been doing this? And you say yes. Well, they're physicians. They can go, he hasn't done any of that, right?
Yeah.
But a good example is when I was at Silent Circle, I was working an obscene amount of hours, as you know, and I was eating poorly. I was, and I put on a lot of weight. I put on probably like 40 pounds while I was there. And when I got done, well, actually before I got done, I walked in the hospital one day. My heart was out of rhythm, blood pressure was through the roof and everything like that. And I ignored my responsibility to take care of myself for a good period of time, right? I'm not going to do that. I still work a lot of hours now, but I'm cognizant of everything that goes in my body, even if it's not good for me, right? Because you're always making a deal with yourself.
Sure,
But what I
sure.
find is, the first time I went and saw my cardiologist in 2016, when it first happened, I probably weighed 255. right? And today I weigh about 210. And his affinity for really wanting to get after and be aggressive and say, hey, why don't we try this? I read something about this. I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV, but I read something about this. Is that a valid thing? And if not, why? They'll sit and spend time with you. And that's on anything.
Yeah.
Right. And especially if you're one of these folks like I am that wants to get off pills. How can I do things where I don't have to involve myself with big pharma? Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer or anything like that, but I think that we can be a lot more aggressive kind of about, kind of the farmer's almanac medicine, right? People used to say, well, don't do that, right? And a lot of it was in-home care because it had to be, and it had to be with stuff that you had around the house because we were agrarians and it took so long to get out from the city for an ambulance or a medical professional, right? And so people had to figure it out. I think we adopt a little bit of that, but use some hard proven science along with it. Then, because there's very little obesity over here. You don't see, I haven't seen an obese person, maybe somebody that's in their 60s or 70s kind of just slowing down a little bit, but you don't see obese people here because they have a big culture of walking, right? They walk everywhere. So there's a culture of fitness, and they don't have a lot of processed foods, and they don't consume the portions that we consume as Americans.
Well, and I would wager that, given some of their even recent history back the last 20, 30 years, I would bet culturally there's a sense of they're mastering their own destiny, right?
Yes. Yep.
And I think it plays a huge part, and as much as I would want civics to be taught, like seriously, I think the nature of what a health class is. I grew up in a situation where it wasn't fitness for fitness's sake, but we worked out. Like I was a big weightlifter, but we did it to
powerless, right?
Yeah. And we just, because what else are you going to do, man? Right. I mean, it's the Midwest. There's nothing else to do. Right. So, right. But a lot of that
engaged in sidewalk pharmaceuticals, right?
That's
about it, right?
And you had to learn how to take care of yourself if you were going to do those things. Right. And I think technology can really help now. I didn't have that when our big idea was if you really want to get jacked, which we did because we were powerlifting, either go get a pack of amino acids, which don't do shit, right. Or what I did is I ate a shit ton of peanut butter for the protein.
Right.
Because I've never really
your peas about all they do.
Yeah. Well, and I've never been a big fan of animal meat. I'll eat meat, don't get me wrong. I've spent a lot of time as a vegetarian for no other reason than I just feel better personally. But so I'll eat a lot of peanut butter. But now that I can harness technology for myself, I'm a little older, so I'm hopefully a little wiser about it. And I can have conversations with people, whether it's through social media or I spent a lot of time at Kaiser talking to my doctor. You can start to fine tune things. And one day I'll tell you the funny story. Have you ever heard the funny story where I tried to trick him into prescribing me TRT?
No.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was getting tested a lot was my testosterone levels. There's 2 or 3 different tests you can get, and I'd get them all. And sometimes I would creep down in the low part. Well, okay, so I like to work out in the morning because if I don't do it, I'm not going to do it. And I like to just get it out of the way. And I also like to work out fasted because I don't like to eat breakfast often. I just don't like it. I never have. And so I've quickly figured out through science that you can artificially tank your testosterone levels. And the chief way to do that is by working out really hard. And you have this window of time where your testosterone will massively drop. And so I'd go for these huge bike rides, man, just burying myself. And one time I actually went in there still in my cycling gear because that's how hard I went. And quickly he figured it out.
Nice job. Good job, my friend. Almost. Yeah. You almost have. It's all those years of medical school but you almost beat me. Right? Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I have AFib, right? You know that. And I battled it on and off for quite a while. And the fastest changing, most exciting medicine, if you ask the doctors right now, is EP cardiology, electrophysiology. There's 2 kinds of cardiologists, there's plumbers and there's electricians. And my cardiologist, I believe, has a degree in electrical engineering, right? And then he went to medical school, and so he's an EP cardiologist, and he's, I think he's bad to the bone. He works at, the Norfolk Heart Center is one of the top 10 heart centers in America. But when you roll in to go get an ablation now, where they're going to go in and basically remap the electricity of your heart, when you roll in there, it looks like a sock now. It doesn't look like an operating room, right? There's these massive 80-inch televisions, and as soon as they start hooking you up, everything starts firing up, and it's good, But it's, I laughed to myself. I had to get one thing where I've got to have attended to that is a massive technology event.
Yeah.
Right? And but one of the things, so AliveCor made a watch band and a little thing so you could monitor your heart rate. And it was largely because they got it FDA approved to notice AFib. All right. Well, you have the ability to send it to your doctor. My doctor, the health group that my doctor's in, they're like, no, we're not doing that. And I'm like, why not? He's like, because that information has to be secure. Do you understand how much of that information? I'm like, well, you can set it to send all of it, or just go back in time, kind of wireframe the side of an event and notice when it started. He goes, yeah. He goes, you're one of the people, because you're in technology, that would do that. Everybody else would vomit a month's worth and tell me to go find it.
Right.
Right. And I think, I don't follow AliveCor, but, now that the heart rate is built into the Apple Watch, I'm not sure, because I know they were going to do the AFib piece too. But, but again, he was like, awesome that I'm taking care of myself. When I walked in, he would be, hey, let me look at your Apple Watch. Right. And he would scroll back and he would go check it out and say, okay, yep, that's exact. Then they could bookend it and give me better care. All right. And I think as we move forward, there's going to be more, what they call RPM, remote patient monitoring, in the, treated like an IoT device, machine to machine. It's going to have to be secured, and it's going to be over legislated, right? Because Cooper's a big one for this. And this is where I think some of the genius is. You have any kind of IoT device, whether it's a sensor out in the ground somewhere, or, something that's in somebody's body to keep them alive. If I only need 8 megabytes to get all the thing in there and get the security cert in there, make the chip, put it on an 8 megabyte chip.
That's right. Yeah.
Easiest way to prevent compromise is I got no room to stuff anything in there.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, if I was going to put malware into like say Windows is the easiest one to talk about. That registry system that comes from the time you power up till the time you see your desktop. There's, after all the base, get the board warmed up, push stuff from the firmware, and it starts what? It starts adding processes, right? Well, your antivirus, program is just a process. Well, it doesn't start in the early ones, not for any other reason than it helps boot up faster and it's better customer experience. So there's an opportunity to wedge it in there. Right? There's an opportunity to wedge malware in any one individual machine like that. And that's not just computers, but anything that has got to boot up, right? Well, as we go into RPM, where's all that data going to go? Right? Because again, does the device recognize an incident and then bookend it and shit can the rest? Well, how's it doing that, right? I think that, and it's going to be all on app based, right? Because the patient, why are you going to lose an opportunity to let the patient follow their own health if they're remotely interested in it? All right, which I think most people are. Actually, I'm not going to say it that way. I think most people with specialty problems, like, when I have AFib, or certain people have different other specialty problems, they become like an amateur cardiologist or an amateur orthopedic guy if they've got some systemic, something that keeps bothering them, right? And it's, most medical professionals welcome that, right? Because, you're participatory in your own care, right? But I do agree that there's two sides of that coin on social media, right? One is, hey, I'm looking for information on X, Y, and Z, right? And people can come and offer their opinion, right? The other one is, with dudes shirtless pictures of themselves after they've gone HGH or whatever it is, they're now jacked at age 60, right? It's, hey, I got a class reunion coming up in 3 years. I'm only that far away before I walked in there going, I mean, that's the thing. That's like, you got your 25th coming up. Get down and get yourself some testosterone, some HGH, whatever it is, and roll in there just banging.
Oh man, and it always kills me too, because I've been in enough gyms long enough and around enough athletes that are on and off that stuff. Right. I don't know about you, man, but when I see a photo, I can see the graininess, the texture of the skin, and I'm like, that dude's on Mexican supplements, 100%.
Yeah.
It's super unscientific on my part. I get it, but man, is it apparent.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like the East German swimmers, like in the '72 Olympics. You
Yeah.
know, their brows were so steroid free, you could set a wine glass on them. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
and again,
Yeah.
no, it wasn't us. You know,
Right.
well, just because you got a good masking agent doesn't mean that, either that or you're, that evolutionary drawing where it comes up to small ape to man. You got to slot them one half a step back. No, I don't think so. I mean, we're all this together, and I think you've done something to modify it. But I do think when it comes to testosterone therapy now for adults, they've got to handle it, because it's, before it would just be testosterone, and then it would kick in an estrogen effect even in men, and have
Hmm.
some adverse sides there. But now I think they're managing it better, and the time release of it. Like, I have a lot of my buddies that go do it, and I've thought about doing it myself.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, yeah, go get an advanced hormone panel, and then take it from there.
It's super safe now, man. And testosterone with the right balance to balance estrogen and other
Yeah,
things, whether you're taking something that needs to be cycled or not cycled, you take it for a couple months and then you're
right,
off, and so forth and so
right.
on. Dan and I had this conversation too, man, and he always brings up Lyle Alzado, the Raiders football player that got brain cancer.
Yeah,
Because to us as kids, that was portrayed as a side effect of all the supplements he was taking. And maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know, man. But the world is a completely different place than it was then.
right.
I mean, you
So
look at
illegal in the NFL then.
yeah,
And
right.
hey, if and Americans are this way, if one of something is good, three has to be three times better.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And
Right.
Americans are uniquely, like, you come here and travel other places. It's not this. I used to think it was this, quintessentially Western idea, but no, it's not. No, I think I got to give myself a little break before, before I start having to comb the hair on my feet, on the bottom of my feet, that kind of thing,
Well, it's a really good point though, man, to kind of wrap this up. That like I said, I really don't go to see a doctor, like
Right.
if I'm sick, unless I'm really sick. Well, because I don't really get sick, because I've figured out over time how to take care of all the low hanging fruit myself.
Yes.
And I mean, and having a kid was the best, man, because dude, you got a cold every other week because they're bringing it home. Well, what was the number one thing that fixed that for the family? Wash your hands.
Yeah.
Number one by far, wash your hands.
I mean, what's the biggest, how does, in sub-Saharan Africa, how does disease travel rapidly? It's a foodborne thing.
Yeah.
Right. So Zappos is, they're genius, right? Everybody wants to have the big one where they fix AIDS, they fix something that's really high profile. There's two big problems. One, people don't have shoes, and more importantly, they don't have roads, infrastructure, so that whatever supplies show up at the borders of that nation, the borders of that continent, can't get to the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Zappos is fixing it one pair of shoes at a time.
That's right.
And I think the other big problem is, because you don't see it here, because people are outside all the time, and there's, in businesses and stuff like that, there's air conditioning. A lot of people don't have air conditioning at home, so people have windows open, right? And like where you live now, where you live in a rural area, your kid's going to grow up eating a lot of dirt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think taking that out, having, we get to, and I get it, women have kids, they'll get allergy, there's like, you get these physiological changes from life events, and you develop different things. But when Jared was a little guy, I took him in to get tested because he apparently thought he was allergic to everything. Well, he had like a grass allergy and all this other stuff. And it wasn't like he broke out in hives or anything. He just got a rash or whatever, right? A little skin irritation. And so they wanted him to start coming in for shots. And I think he was like 6 or 7 years old. And at the time, it was just, to me, it was so counterintuitive, other than get the kid out to play,
mm-hmm.
right? Get him outside. And not like he was inside all the time, but we eat processed food all the time. We have to have clean this thing. Hey, I don't want trichinosis or something like that. But by the same token, fresh vegetables, oh, you wash that off. Well, if I get some at the grocery store, I better wash it off, because I don't know the 43 people that who didn't wash their hands that handled it, right? But
That's
when
right.
it comes out of your garden and you just wash it off, there's going to be some sort of residual dirt there and everything. Who cares? Right? Your body needs the minerals, and it's why bees are so important in the environment,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you've got allergy issues, you've got certain things, go find a local beekeeper and buy some honey from him that's in that same ecosystem, because that's going to help you with your allergies.
Yeah. Yeah.
As
See, that's
opposed
a
to
perfect
getting,
example
as
of something
opposed to
that's
getting shots every week, right?
right. That's something that's really low tech, but somehow seems super modern at the same time, or progressive at least, which just takes care of low hanging fruit. And sure, man, not for everybody, it's not going to cure everything, because it's not really a cure. It's more of a preventative thing, right? You get
Right.
you expose yourself to, let's say, whether it's conflict or chaos or harmful things in low doses, you don't come immune to it, but your body knows how to situate itself in it.
Right. You can adapt to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think, you know, because I grew up in a rural, up until we moved to Massachusetts, I was out in the country, dirt road and everything, right? And you're outside all the time. And, you know, you had to wash your hands. They were covered in dirt because you were a kid running around in the grass and dirt, flinging yourself all over the place, right?
Yeah.
But, and even when I moved there, we were always outside playing.
Mhm.
You know, you were playing tackle football in the grass. You were doing, you know, we were in a lake. Right? God knows what was that like. I grew, you know, where I grew up was the plastics capital of the country for a while in the world. Even today, if you go in and pick up an orange bucket at Home Depot, it's my hometown's names on the bottom. Like one of my friends he's sarcastic. He's in the Dan level of sarcasm. I asked him one time if he was going to go to the class reunion. He said, "Heck no!" And I go, "Why not?" He goes, "Because half our class is going to have to leave at 10:30 to go to the 11 to 7 shift at Plastic Can to put handles on buckets, or if they're putting the gaskets in the lids." And I'm like, dude, you know. But you know, but again, you look up there. Like my friends have aged. I feel like when I see them on social media, a lot of them have aged really rapidly. And those of us that moved away when we were 18, 19, 20, to a lesser extent. I think number one, it's harsh winters and everything else. But you know, from the time that plastics became a thing in America, they were, and up until probably the mid 70s and 80s, before we said, hey, you probably shouldn't dump that shit in rivers and let it seep into the ground. Mm-hmm. Well, how long? What's the half-life on all that, right? And how's it affecting kids, and how does it affect how you age and everything else? I mean, we had, I won't use the company's name because I don't want somebody to come back at me later on and say you said this, but in the neighborhood I grew up in, it was all engineers. You were either chemical engineers for this one company, or you were all like software engineers, mechanical engineers for General Electric. And my dad was a General Electric guy. We had, I want to say, like 45 homes, all right? And probably about, not quite evenly split, and I don't know the split, but it was half and half, right? You know, more or less, right? 60-40 maybe one way or the other, but it was pretty evenly split between folks that worked in the plastics industry, in chemical industry, and folks that worked at General Electric building military propulsion for naval ships, right? And all of a sudden, in the mid 70s, all the kids of these engineers, chemical engineers, started getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Hodgkin's disease, right? And so most of the treatments that are done today, or that became mainstream, certainly in the 80s and 90s, were as a result of what was going on in the neighborhood, right? I mean, you've got 20 families and like 7 kids have Hodgkin's disease. I mean, that's you know, statistically, that's, you know, it's a relevant sample size, right? But and it wasn't the engineers themselves; it was their kids, and it had to be said because it wasn't from like none of the other kids did. But hey, how many of your parents worked at plastics factories back then? A lot, right? And even if it didn't manifest itself as something as devastating as Hodgkin's disease, what other little things along the way are, you know, causing you to slow down or causing you a shorter life?
Yeah, sure. So. Well, you know, to wrap this up, think about this, because it's something I've thought about. Like you have arthritis, which is, you know, and you mentioned it. Once you start to reduce processed grains, you reduce inflammation, right?
Right.
And so we know now that even if you don't have a gluten allergy, eating processed grains produces inflammation in the body. And we know that inflammation has a devastating effect on our body. Well, I mean, I don't think it's a big surprise that there's a bunch of young people running around like assholes. Yeah. Honestly, man, because their brain's inflamed.
Right.
And they're constantly under attack, and it produces a stress reaction. Then you get the cascade of hormones to counteract it. And they're just basically running around out of control because their bodies are out of control.
Right.
I'm not making excuses for them. Don't get me wrong, right?
I don't disagree with that at all, because I think, But it goes back to the other conversation we had, about me doing yoga and everything like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
you and we spend a lot of time together because we're friends and we talk to each other, and every time we speak, we get to know each other better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, pay attention to what you put in your body, but also hey, I need to spend some time with me, because if I want to be, if I want to know me, I've actually got to get away from everybody else and just, free yourself of that distraction.
Right.
But I'm a big believer in reducing inflammation across the board, because it's not just what I can feel in my joints and everything like that. It's in your organs, it's in your brain, it's in everything else. And I think we're all much happier people when you're in balance.
I mean, it's certainly over time I've felt immensely more calm.
Yes.
Well, because I'm not under stress. I mean, your
Right.
body itself isn't stressed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm more resilient to my environment. I can be a little more extroverted.
Well, I think his name is Nicholas Taleb.
Yeah,
yeah. He's a Black Swan, and that.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Anti-Fragile, and I like the concept. It said concept is like the wind can blow out a match but fuel a fire.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and it's all about your circumstances and where you're at, right? But he talks about not being resilient, because resilient means that you have to take a step back, organize yourself, and you come back even stronger. What he talks about is being anti-fragile, where whatever happens around you doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right? And I think but I think that's like, if you want to get, we'll get our moment of Zen on before we leave everybody, that I think that's really what you look at is like, hey, the world's happening around me, and I choose how to process it. And hey, everybody that says that they do this right all the time is lying their ass off, and there's no way of getting around it, right? Because we're emotional human beings, and there's ego, there's fear, there's love, there's hate, there's all of that book of business, and what's important to you manifests itself. But it's being conscious, right? And I think that comes from spending time with yourself, where you're like, hey, I'm really a dick under these circumstances. So either don't put yourself into them, or you walk in them with a different attitude, right?
That's right.
And it helps, I think, not only you to make the hard decisions, but I think from a leadership perspective, right? Or when you walk into a classroom, right? You've got your job there is to get a certain behavior, right? Same thing as a CEO of a company, president of a company, chief product officer, leader, just a shop supervisor. Right. I've got a group of people from diverse backgrounds and have diverse interests, and more importantly, what we're talking about, they have diverse emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How do I show up and be that person that people want to gravitate to, because I'm that calming influence? Right. I think that is and I've only recently got a handle. I'm talking within the last 5 years. Right. I thought I had a good handle on it when we were working together, but I think now I'm much better at it. I don't, and for a bunch of different reasons, it's a whole another 2 or 3 hours. Again, we're going to show up on the couch one day. I'll have the camera pulling down my body, right? But it's that concept that once you're in a good place, you can help other people to get in a good place.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I literally, I don't have Facebook over here on any apps, and I limit my social media exposure, and I'm generally in a happier place when I do. Right. And I, just like anything else, you can tune social media however you want. And I've gotten a lot of the stuff that just makes me go apoplectic when I look at it. If for no other reason, then why do people behave that way?
Right.
That's, like I said, that's my moment of Zen for the week, folks.
Man, I agree with you 100%, dude. 100%. And for the record, I tweet a lot, but most of that are the little bots I wrote for myself.
No, I know. I can tell, but it's like I said, it's like anything else. So you're going to use your powers for good or evil.
Yeah, right. And really, it's just one big, long experiment I've been running to see what happens. But yeah, take care of the low-hanging fruit and take care of yours first.
I will be back in the U.S. of A next Sunday.
Okay, cool.
When we get there, so we'll be in the same time zone for a bit.
Sweet.
And then we'll get after it again.
I love it, man.
I want to do like this leadership in tech, and how I want to think about that. We'll talk during the week sometime, but I want to think about that, because stuff that you can use aside from just your wits about you and your understanding of the team your understanding of the work that you're trying to lead the team with. But yeah, I think that'll be a cool one too.
I think so too, man. That's interesting. I'm going to think about that.
Yeah. So let's do that.
All right. Sweet, everybody. 135.
I'll talk to you in the week. Everybody have fun.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.